Now, even though SCHD or the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF or VYM, the Vanguard High Dividend Yield ETF, are generally speaking great ETFs for any long-term investor to buy into if they're looking for dividends, some dividend growth, and some capital appreciation through an ETF that offers a diversified portfolio. Both these ETFs can offer different things for investors, and that's including things like a higher starting yield, higher dividend growth, or a better set up basket of holdings. Now in this video, we're going to go through the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF and of course VYM, another very popular dividend ETF. And I'm going to share with you guys what both these ETFs have to offer, along with at the end of the video, share with you guys which of these ETFs could be better to buy into for an investor that's interested in exposure to high quality dividend ETFs. So if you've sort of been on the fence when it comes to SCHD and or VYM, and you're not really sure which of these ETFs you want to buy into, but they both interest you, well, then make sure to stick around, drop a like down below, and let's get right into it. My A to Z dividend investing ebook has helped countless dividend investors get started with their journey. And my custom dividend tracker that I'm constantly using here on the channel has also helped so many investors stay on track and allow them to see their dividend income in real time. Well, today I have another treat for you guys. I'm not only going to offer you my A to Z dividend investing ebook and the custom dividend tracker, but also just for a short limited time, I'm going to be adding in my brand new weekly dividend blueprint ebook to show you how you can get started with weekly dividend ETFs and add this into your investing strategy. This offer is not going to last long, so go ahead and click the first link down below in my description, and you're going to get both ebooks and the custom dividend tracker bundle. But like I said, please act fast because this won't be around for long. Now let's get back into the video. Now first, just to go over some of the basics for SCHD, it says the objective is the fund's goal is to track as closely as possible before fees and expenses the total return of the Dow Jones US Dividend 100 Index. Now VYM's product summary says seek to track the performance of the FTSE High Dividend Yield Index, which measures the investment return of common stocks of companies characterized by high dividend yields. Now both these ETFs have an expense ratio of 0.06%, so they're tied there. And again, generally speaking, both these ETFs would be classified as typical dividend growth ETFs, at least if you ask me. Now before digging a little bit deeper into each of these ETFs, I thought this was sort of interesting. 88 number of overlapping holdings between SCHD and VYM. 88.9% of SCHD's 103 holdings are also in VYM. So basically all of SCHD, all the holdings inside SCHD are going to be found in VYM, but on the other hand, only 15.4% of VYM's holdings, which are around 600 holdings, are also in SCHD. So simply said, if you buy into VYM, you're also getting a lot of exposure to SCHD, but if you buy into SCHD, you're not necessarily getting as much exposure into VYM. Now ETF overlap is something that a lot of investors always ask me about. I personally have tons of ETF overlap in my portfolio. I don't really mind it whatsoever, especially if I do want more exposure to whatever underlying holdings are inside whatever ETF I'm buying into. But still something important to note, there is some overlap when it comes to both these. Which, speaking of holdings, I think it's important that we also break down some of the top holdings in both SCHD and of course VYM, because at the end of the day, when you're buying into an ETF, you're buying into a basket of holdings, which like I mentioned a minute ago, VYM has over 500 different stocks inside of it, where SCHD has around 100. So if you're very dead set on massive amounts of diversification, well then VYM is going to be probably the better ETF for you. Now, some of the top holdings in SCHD are names like COP, VZ, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, Cisco, names like Texas Instruments, Ultra Group, Chevron, Lockheed Martin, etc., etc. Now, some of the top names in VYM are going to names like Broadcom, JP Morgan, Exxon, United Health Group, we have PG, we have J&J, Walmart, abbvie, Home Depot, and Coca-Cola. So again, even in the top 10 holdings, you're seeing some overlap, some of the same names, but again, more or less the same class of single stocks, names that have been paying dividends, paying more and more dividends over time, generally speaking, and also names that are generally sort of low beta, which again is why I'm a huge fan of both SCHD and VYM, because they offer more or less what I'm looking for as a dividend investor. Now I'm going to share with you guys the total return here in a second, which is most important, but as far as price return goes, VYM is only up around 156%, and this is all the way back since around 2006. Now SCHD is up over 212%, and this is only since 2011. So on the max time frame, just as far as price return goes, SCHD has grown a little bit quicker. But let's next talk about dividends. This is very important, especially if you're like myself and you want to build a portfolio that pays you cash flow and consistently pays you more and more cash flow over time. VYM's trailing 12-month dividend yield is 2.86%, with a trailing 12-month dividend growth rate of around 8%, not bad whatsoever. The last 3 years around 5.95%, not horrible. The last 5 years around 1.67%, and the last 10 years around 7% more or less. So VYM, although not the fastest growing dividend across the entire market, they have been paying more and more in dividends over time to investors, Again, not at the fastest rate I've ever seen, but still offering investors a small but steady amount of more income, which is of course helpful. Now, if you guys know anything about SCHD, you know where I'm going with this one. SCHD not only offers almost a 4% trailing 12-month dividend yield, but a 16.69% dividend growth rate trailing 12 months and 11% dividend growth across the board, basically since inception. Now, this means that investors that bought into SCHD a while ago are not only getting paid more in dividends, but a significant increase in dividends, around 3 times as much in dividends in the last 10 years. Now, I know SCHD ETF is not perfect. Every ETF or every stock for that matter has their own faults, but this ETF, at least since inception, has been paying investors a ton more in dividend income, which is very, very important to what I'm looking for. So I think it's safe to say, as far as comparing dividends and dividend growth rate, SCHD would win sort of by a mile compared to VYM. Now, lastly, it's time to compare the total return, which is dividends plus price return included. If we look at SCHD and VYM's performance over the last 13.5 or so years, if we look at everything included, SCHD has offered investors a total return of over 383%, where VYM is pretty close behind at just around 360%. Now, remember earlier I kind of mentioned that both these ETFs have been great historically for investors, and I still to this day think they could be great investment vehicles because of what they offer. Well, the numbers definitely don't disagree with that because both these ETFs over the last decade plus have offered investors a nice amount of total return, offered investors some tax efficiency, some low beta in their portfolio, and offered them dividends and dividend growth historically. Now, that being said, especially since 2020, SCHD has really started to outperform VYM, and then just as of recently, during the most recent drop, they're now trading very, very closer neck and neck. So as far as picking either SCHD or VYM as a long-term position in your portfolio, well, for one, you could of course just buy into both them, even though VYM does hold a ton of SCHD inside the portfolio. But if you only want to hold one of the ETFs, I think it's more important to look at things like the top holdings within each ETF and asking yourself if you do want exposure, maybe to one or the other a lot more. And beyond that, especially for myself, because I am more of a dividend income focused investor, it's really going to come down to the dividend and the dividend growth rate, which of course is not going to be promised in the future, but at least since inception, SCHD has done a great job of paying dividends and more in dividends historically. I'm currently 32 years old, and by the time I'm 35, my goal is to get to 10,000 shares of this ETF. So based off of the current annual payout amount, which again is probably going to keep going up, as long as history were to repeat itself, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen for sure. A lot of people always ask me, well, is SCHD going to for sure keep paying more and more every single year? And the answer is absolutely not for sure. But based off of the previous 11% dividend growth rate, if I had 10,000 shares of this ETF, I'm looking at thousands upon thousands of dollars of increased income over the next 10 or so years. Now, what's also awesome is that if you get to a point where you have, let's say, hundreds or thousands of shares and you just reinvest all the dividends into more shares over time. Let's say you're in your 30s or even your 40s, you have at least 10, 20 years before you're probably looking to retire. All that to say that once again, both these ETFs, along with tons of ETFs across the market, if you are a dividend-focused investor, can be a great vehicle to get you to where you want to go. But before I go, I do have a question for you guys down below. If you only could choose one for whatever reason, either SCHD or of course VYM, which of these two ETFs would you personally hold on to for the long run? For me personally, it would be SCHD all the way, but comment your opinion down below. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.